What is going on, everybody? Welcome into my Week 10 NFL Power Rankings, which means we are going to be reflecting upon a wild Week 9 of action that featured a ton of unexpected results, a bunch of upsets. So in this video, I'm going to be sorting through who's rising, who's falling, which upsets mattered, which were maybe a little bit more of just a blip in the radar. Going to be a very fun video to sort through all of the madness. Really looking forward to it. Please do hit that like button down below. It really helps me out, helps support my channel, so I appreciate you taking a second to do that. Also, if you're new, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any more NFL analysis heading your way here on this channel throughout the week and beyond. All right, let's get started at the bottom. No surprise here, the Houston Texans staying put, losing to the Miami Dolphins, and this team just does not have a win in sight. Very clearly, in my opinion, the worst team in football, but there is another team in their tier at the very bottom, the Detroit Lions. Fortunately for all of us, perhaps even Lions fans included, off this week, so the NFL doing us a favor. We don't have to talk about the Detroit Lions this week, but those two teams to me are in that bottom feeder style tier right there. This next group, a little bit more scrappy, but definitely still bottom feeders in their own ways. Then the New York Jets are coming in at number 30, dropping down one spot after really getting slaughtered by the Indianapolis Colts. Don't let some garbage time touchdowns against vanilla defenses fool you. This team got demolished by the Indianapolis Colts, giving up over 500 yards of offense and just all around back to being one of the worst teams in football. And this team just can't find any ounce of consistency on the season. And then the Miami Dolphins also going to be dropping down a spot, getting passed up by the Jacksonville Jaguars this week, who had a much more impressive win. The Dolphins scraped by against the Texans, but nothing's changed here. The offense and defense leave a lot to be desired, and this team's rebuild has certainly not gone according to plan. Then we have the Jacksonville Jaguars jumping up 2 spots, a stunning win over the Buffalo Bills, who seem to just kind of repeatedly shoot themselves in the foot, but the Jags taking advantage, showing a little bit of defensive prowess this week and a little bit of team fortitude as they survive an injury to Trevor Lawrence that took him out of this game for a little while. And, Josh Allen defensively for the Jacksonville Jaguars is emerging as a kind of superstar talent for this team. So, +2 for the Jags. Well, we're going to continue to learn a little bit more about this team as we go, but let's give them some credit. Big win this week against the Buffalo Bills. Then we've got the Washington football team staying put at number 27 here on bye. Again, the NFL doing us a favor, not having us have to talk about some of these just so uninspiring football teams with Washington and Detroit this week. Then we have a tier gap up into teams that at least have some semblance of hope for the P word, being the playoffs. Philadelphia Eagles hanging in there against the Chargers this week. They're finding their own way under Nick Sirianni with Jalen Hurts. It's not a pretty brand of football, but they play a nice kind of bend, don't break style of defense. They run the ball very well and have a very good offensive line. Hurts is kind of discovering what he can get away with in the NFL as he develops. So they're hanging around, staying put. Good loss if there is such a thing. But a loss nonetheless. They're staying put. Then the Carolina Panthers are going to drop down 2 spots. I mean, the defense can absolutely ball out, man. Matt Rule, this young defense, Stephon Gilmore getting in there making plays. That side of the ball is not an issue here, but they quite frankly have one of the worst offenses in the NFL and surely the worst offense of any team that has any semblance of hope towards making the playoffs. But the Sam Darnold experiment has been a colossal disaster, as has pretty much everything they've thrown at this offensive line. So Joe Brady and this staff is going to have to really hit the lab and figure out how to at least make this a functional offense, how to get Sam Darnold to take better care of the football so they can just, lean on this defense and maybe play sort of that, run the ball, play defense style where they can try to escape low-scoring games. I think this year that's going to be their best approach. But that's also really not Joe Brady's and honestly Sam Darnold's mentality. So definitely a lot to figure out for the Carolina Panthers, who are very much stocked down over the last month. Then the New York Giants going to climb up a spot to number 24. Look, the Giants are hanging around, and I do think they're very well coached on the defensive side of the ball, and they have a kind of high floor status on that side of the ball. And then offensively, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I still just don't trust Daniel Jones. I don't trust the play calling, the offensive line. They're a decent football team. They've put together a nice run of games here, beating the Panthers, beating this week the Las Vegas Raiders. A very good win, don't get me wrong. But I'm just not at a point where I'm taking this team all that seriously. There might be some added hype for the Giants this week. It's still been a very disappointing season, but getting some of these guys back healthy, this could be the start of something for the Giants, but that's not the first time we've said that this season either. Then the Bears at 21. They are going to drop down a spot because the Atlanta Falcons, our next team, had a very impressive win over the Saints this week. But that said, the Bears are really hanging around this kind of pesky tier here where they're in a lot of games. And the problem here is this defense, especially with Khalil Mack not out there, is not an elite group. That's become very clear as the season's gone on. They're not a bad defense, but they also have been pretty poor offensively. Now, the one saving grace here is Justin Fields is showing really nice development on a week-to-week basis, which honestly, we said it coming into the year. If you walk out of this season and you feel good about Justin Fields heading into next year, that's all you can really ask for here. So at least there's that. It's not leading towards a lot of wins, but at the same time, this team got just absolutely screwed by the refs in this game. It's one of the most one-sided refereeing affairs you're going to see. Granted, a blocked punt really helped the Bears stay in this game towards the end, but a lot of those calls were significant and helped the Steelers. So a weird game, tough to know exactly what to take away from it. I wasn't necessarily all that impressed by the Bears as a team. Justin Fields really making some plays in the second half, though. Good stuff. Then the Atlanta Falcons, as I mentioned, moving up 2 spots. God, is Matt Ryan just not the most frustrating quarterback to look at in the NFL? I mean, you just got to accept at this point, when you look back at last week and how bad Matt Ryan played, that he's just a quarterback that 2 or 3 times a year, he's going to come out and just lay an absolute pile of dog shit on the field. This week, back to Matt Ryan, moving the ball, getting these secondary pieces involved. Cordarrelle Patterson, these receivers outside of Ridley, who's not out there for them, and Pitts. Good offense performance against a very, very good Saints defense, possibly one of the best defenses in the NFL. And they're in the mix in the NFC wildcard. I think it's going to be really dependent on not just them playing well, but some other teams like the Saints, Vikings, and 49ers and Seahawks kind of just continuing their trajectory and not turning some things around if they're going to get that illustrious 7 seed in the NFC. But they're in the mix there. So stock up for the Atlanta Falcons. And then stock down for the San Francisco 49ers, who had not just the most disappointing game of week 9, but one of the more disappointing games of the entire season. You look back on what I said about the Niners last week, and they were seemingly building something. They go to Chicago, come out of there with the win where Jimmy Garoppolo looks great. The play calling, the playmakers with Ayuk and Debo looked fantastic. The run game with Elijah Mitchell, getting George Kittle back this week against the Cardinals. The defense starting to play better, which has been a huge issue for this team. And then they take on the Cardinals without Kyler Murray, without DeAndre Hopkins getting a gift and a true opportunity to come out and say, hey, we are in this thing. We can move the ball. We can play good defense. We have Kyle Shanahan. And they completely botch it offensively. Not necessarily that they didn't move the ball or that Jimmy Garoppolo was terrible, but the turnovers, just shooting themselves in the foot, giving the game to the Cardinals, on top of just playing atrocious defense. And then you can't even call it cherry on top, but they lose Mike McGlinchey, their right tackle for this season this week. Just a brutal week for the 49ers and their fans who have had a rough season. It is at the point where you have to make a decision on, do you just play Trey Lance to get some sort of a beat on what he's going to do for you heading into next year? Or do you just sit him entirely and just tank the season? Man, what a disappointing week for the Niners. I don't know the answer. The answer to me is not fire Kyle Shanahan, by the way. I know he's getting a lot of crap. He's not having a great season, but that just seems a little impulsive. There's a lot of stuff going on for the San Francisco 49ers that needs to be corrected here. But nonetheless, a deserved drop of -5 for the 49ers. The Denver Broncos are going to stay put at number 20. Really a weird game from them. This was not the team we've seen all season long. I mean, they were methodical offensively. Teddy Bridgewater played, can we say the best quarterbacked game of the week? Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of anyone else. Maybe Baker Mayfield. But yeah, I mean, Teddy Bridgewater was slinging the ball around the field, showed velocity, decision-making, poise in the pocket. And if he plays like that every week, the Broncos are going to be in the playoffs. But as we've seen from Teddy Bridgewater's career, that's not him. So hard to know exactly what to take away from that. But I will give credit to Bridgewater, who was just lights out in this game. Indefensible, if you will, frankly. And the defense coming alive as well. So big win for the Broncos. They need to show this again. They need to show some element of consistency here because on the season, their defense has not been nearly this good. They did just lose Von Miller this week, trading him to the Rams. And offensively, they get Judy back. That could be a very serious projector of good offense moving forward, but I definitely need to see more before I'm taking the Broncos too seriously here, who have had a pretty rough 5 or 6 week stretch here since starting 3-0. It also, by the way, doesn't help that Russell Wilson came back this week, which is going to push the Seahawks back up above the Broncos, so a potentially diluted non-rise for the Denver Broncos, if that makes sense. But then we have the New Orleans Saints dropping down 2 spots and into this cluster of scrappy, non-playoff caliber teams, in my opinion. I lowered them last week despite beating the Bucs, and Saints fans were livid, absolutely livid. Not just that I lowered them, but that they weren't in the top 10. And I was like, you can't put a team quarterbacked by Trevor Siemian that high. And they dropped for it last week, rightfully so. Now this week they're dropping 2 because of a disappointing defensive support for a Trevor Siemian. And I said it last week that win against the Bucs is probably going to go down as this team's Super Bowl. It's just, there's only so much you can do when you have a backup quarterback as your starter. And to lean on dominant defense week after week after week, we've seen it time and time again. You just can't do that in the NFL in 2021. You do need to have good quarterback play to consistently win, and the Saints, unfortunately, do not have that. And Siemian wasn't even all that bad in this game, but enough mistakes, surely, to not be able to beat the Atlanta Falcons as 6.5-point favorites. So, stock down for the Saints, closing off that tier gap. Now into my next tier of teams that I still think are like wild card caliber teams, regardless of where their standings are currently. So the Vikings at 18, kind of bouncing back this week, moving the ball again, showing that when this team pushes the ball downfield and doesn't play with that stubborn Mike Zimmer, we're just going to run the ball 5 trillion times and escape with a win. When they don't take that 1960s mentality, this is a very good football team, but unfortunately they are hampered by the mentality of their head coach at times. But playing the Ravens very close and falling apart late in this game, kind of in a way that the Vikings tend to do, frankly. But still a very good football team that almost went on the road and took down a Ravens team that is going to come in very high in these power rankings. So not a bad week for the Vikings, but at some point they got to find a way to win these close games. Then we've got the Indianapolis Colts +1. Look, this is a good football team. Had a terrible start with a brutal schedule to kick off, paired with a bunch of injuries. But this team's coming together. Now they need Wentz to play like he did last week more consistently, but if he does, this team can very much get into the playoff picture. I trust their defense to give them a very nice floor. I still wish they had a little bit more star talent, star power on that side of the ball, but the offense really coming together. The run game, getting that offensive line, those big five up front, that's one of the best offensive lines in football, surely helping, especially with Jonathan Taylor running the ball like he is right now. So they have an identity, and it's a good football team, but as far as the standings go, they have a lot of ground to catch up on. But this is a team that nobody really wants to play because they just kind of make you play close to perfect if you want to beat them, because they're just very stable and physical and sound across the board. Then we have the Seattle Seahawks, who are going to jump up 5 spots this week on the bye week. That's because Russell Wilson's back, and you add a top 3 to 5 quarterback back into the mix, going from Geno to Russ, it's going to boost you up. So they're a team that sees the opportunity in front of them. They didn't, their season wasn't deleted by this Russell Wilson injury. That 7 seed is very much up for grabs, and I think the Seahawks are going to make a very strong push for that, even though their schedule is pretty tough. Then the New England Patriots are going to stay put at 15. I've just been very impressed by the Patriots. They're very similar to what we said about the Indianapolis Colts. They have gotten their offensive line healthy. They run the ball very well. They have a young quarterback in Mac Jones that they just don't want to make mistakes and make the throws that are there. Defensively, they're very good as well, though I wish they had a little more star talent. So a very similar team. Bill Belichick showing his chops a lot more the last few weeks, which is good for Patriots fans to see him kind of, I don't know if this is fair to say, but reemerge as that elite head coach that he is, getting this defense that's kind of put together by scraps like Miles Bryant, for example, in the slot, these different pieces up front playing very good football. Some of the additions they made, Matt Judon, Christian Barmore making big impacts there. So it's been fun to see Belichick put this defense and really this team together. And they're kind of closer to the team I viewed coming into the season, where they're a solid team and going to be in the mix for the AFC wildcard. But then we take a tier gap up to teams that are much more expected to make the playoffs, but have some issues in their own right. So that's going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals, who are going to come down 3 spots this week, getting slaughtered by the Cleveland Browns. The last couple weeks, this team has really shown some warts. I think they're pretty dependent on Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow kind of carrying this offense. Their offensive line is still a significant issue, so that's a bad start there. And then the defense the last couple weeks has started to kind of fall apart. They had shown to be a very sound unit. That was the concern on this team coming into the season, was star talent on defense and tackling and just experience on that side of the ball, and that's become an issue the last couple of weeks. So definitely stock down for the Bengals. In 2 weeks, they've gone from number 1 seed in the AFC to now last place in their division. Tough couple of weeks there and certainly some bad losses. I still think this is a good football team. I love Joe Burrow and what they're going to be able to do offensively. I think the defense can turn some things back around a little bit, but regardless, coming down 3 spots. Also, the Las Vegas Raiders dropping down 5 spots. Man, as soon as I say something good about the Raiders, they go around and have a colossal disaster of a week. Henry Ruggs, that whole incident. I talked about this in my picks last week, but in my opinion, lock him up for 20 plus years. No excuses for drunk driving. I mean, I'm removing the football from this thing right now. Like, seriously, call an Uber. All the people making excuses. Oh, he's only 22 years old. He made one mistake. Do you know how many freaking times at 22 years old I made a conscious decision to sleep on my buddy's couch or call an Uber when I felt I had drank too much? I mean, seriously, you're an adult. You murdered someone, in my opinion, morality speaking. So, I mean, seriously, Henry Ruggs should never even be considered for the NFL again. 20 years from now, take him out of jail, let him have a rejuvenation project and live a different life. But he should never be given the opportunity to play in the NFL again. In my opinion, he is a piece of shit and a selfish piece of shit. So lock him up, and that's my Henry Ruggs spiel. You can agree with it or not, but it needs to be said, man. Don't drink and drive. It is one of the worst things you can do as a human being on this earth. So seriously, let that be a message to you guys. Learn from Henry Ruggs and don't take a mother away because you're too big of an idiot to call an Uber or sleep on a couch. Like, just seriously, what the hell is going on here, people? But back to football, the Las Vegas Raiders dropping down 5 spots they lose to the Giants this week, and they did lose a huge part of their offense being Henry Ruggs. Now, I know that Deshaun Jackson has signed here, and that was a good signing. I think that keeps them alive offensively. I think that puts that element back into that offense that was clearly missing against the Giants this week. They could not connect on the deep ball, which has been a big part of this offense, was Derek Carr having that ability to really spin it. Now, Jackson is not Henry Ruggs. He's a good player, but Ruggs was really playing well this year. That's a huge loss for this offense. He also has serious health issues, so if you're going to now give him full-time reps, which is what he wanted, he's shown over the last 4 years that he can't really hold up in that department. So, nice signing. Is it going to save their offense and be just a plug-and-play replacement for Henry Ruggs? No, certainly not, in my opinion. So that's a huge loss to the offense, and the defense. You know, they're fine. They've added some nice pieces on that side of the ball, but they're not this dominant elite defense either. So they're still right in the mix. The AFC West has become incredibly fascinating, with the Raiders and Chargers kind of settling down a little bit after a fast start, and the Chiefs hanging right around there. So hell, even the Broncos making things interesting by beating the Cowboys this week. So the AFC West, very good division. Then the AFC North, also a very good division, as the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to climb up another spot. Look, their experience, their defense, their depth and talent, and I don't want to say different ways they can beat you, because they kind of have the same approach, but they have different answers for different tests, as we saw against the Bears this week. So they're a good football team. They play excellent defense. TJ Watt has now had multiple games where he has just changed the outcome of the game single-handedly. Getting him back healthy has completely brought the Steelers back into this wild card, dare I say, even AFC North mix. So +1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though offensively there just is not a lot of explosiveness there. But they've shown they have different answers with Deontay Johnson and Freiermuth. Woo! Pat Freiermuth, man. We got to shout out Pat Freiermuth. Had no business going in the second round. That dude was completely overshadowed by Kyle Pitts. Pat Freiermuth's been a better tight end than Kyle Pitts this year. I don't think that's going to last through the future, but let's just say it, man. Pat Freiermuth was a steal by the Steelers. Then we have the Cleveland Browns +3. Huge win against the Cincinnati Bengals. Interesting, man. Very interesting that this offense comes back alive without Odell Beckham. This is the second time, if not third, that has shown to be the case. Baker all of a sudden playing in structure, nailing targets down the field, getting Nick Chubb back, obviously helping this offense as well, and Myles Garrett just destroying offensive game plans. Good to see the talent come back alive for the Cleveland Browns, and they are right back in the mix here after a couple of rough weeks for the Browns, but getting healthy, getting hot at the right time. All right, Los Angeles Chargers staying put this week, kind of escaping against the Eagles. I thought it was a good win. You know, that was not a great Eagles team that they beat, but certainly a team that matched up well with the Chargers. As we've talked about, the Chargers have struggled with these more physically minded teams that have very good offensive lines in weeks past. So finding different ways to win. Definitely the best team win for the Chargers in a little bit. So just going to stay put. I wasn't like wowed by the Chargers, but still good to see them survive as a top 10 team, which is certainly not easy to do. Then I got the Chiefs at number 9. They're going to stay put for me with the win over the Packers. That's also going to wrap up this kind of, wild card caliber team tier. I wasn't impressed by the Chiefs. The defense woke up in kind of a unique blitz-heavy attack against Jordan Love this week. Not sure how much to take away from that and what that's going to mean for the defense moving forward. But this team also continuing to really struggle offensively, and they're just in a slump. So until the offense, wakes up and starts looking like the Chiefs of old, which I still think is very much in the realm of possibilities, the pieces are all there. To me, it's just a mental thing and a preparation thing that is missing with the Chiefs right now. So they're in this weird state of I believe in the Chiefs. Gun to my head, I would pick them to win the AFC West. I don't feel great about that, but the talent's all there. So I'm going to stand by the Chiefs slightly, but also I'm not in on them as even a tier 2 team in the NFL right now. This next tier is going to be teams that are certainly playoff teams, but teams that I can envision winning a Super Bowl, even if they're, in my mind, a crop below tier 1. So the Tennessee Titans moving up 4 spots. I already know Titans fans are going to be livid about this one, and they've had a very impressive month. Ryan Tannehill playing great, A.J. Brown uncoverable, and most notably, this defense has totally woken up. This pass rush with Danico Autry, Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, really getting after it, man. And if they continue that, if this secondary continues to round into place, I will have to change my tone on really this defense and Mike Vrabel as a whole, who's done a great job this season. But as we know, defense is very high variance and unpredictable into the future. I'm still going to have some hesitations on Ryan Tannehill behind a pretty shaky offensive line. Currently has Bobby Hart starting at left tackle. No Derrick Henry and no run game right now. I understand the significance and how impressive this last month of football has been from the Titans, and they're very much in the AFC Super Bowl race. But I'm also going to be honest here, man. I'm still not in on the Titans as like a top team in the NFL, as the best team in the AFC. I think they're right in that conversation, in the mix. But if I'm going to be honest here, and I'm going to do that, I'm not as high on the Titans, I think, as Titans fans are going to want, and that's fine. You know, you guys can go expect Super Bowl this year. Go for it. Personally, I'm not expecting basically Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown to get you there. We'll see. Still plenty of time to make me look foolish on that. Then we got the Dallas Cowboys, who are going to move down 1 spot here, but not going to look too much into that loss against the Broncos, because their entire resume leading up to this game was that of a completely different football team, right? Their defense had their worst game of the season. Offensively, I don't even know what that was. I mean, Dak was so bad this week. The offensive line with Terrence Steele stepping in at left tackle was a disaster. So just didn't look like the same team. They are going to move down a spot, but in general, not this big sweeping overreaction here to the Cowboys. I think this was kind of their stinker game. Most of these teams have had one. So just dropping down 1 for the Dallas Cowboys. Then the Baltimore Ravens gonna move up a spot. I mean, this team they're just so resilient, and they have a good baseline because they're well coached. I think this defense, even though they've had some injuries, is still tough. And then offensively, they have their scheme that they kind of come into the game leaning on. They hope that the run game works. They hope the play action over the middle of the field works. So they have this nice baseline. But then when shit hits the fan, they can say, all right, Lamar, get us out of trouble. And that's what he was able to do against the Vikings here. So they're just a very resilient, multiple football team. I do think Lamar, as we sit here right now, probably the MVP of the league right now, because he's had multiple wins now where nothing is working and he's not getting a ton of help, and he has kind of had that team on my back mentality. So +1 for the Ravens. And then the Bills dropping down a spot and dropping out of tier 1. On one hand, you got to be impressed with how well the defense has played this year, but their level of competition has been, dare I say, garbage for the majority of the season. Well, I don't want to say majority, but there's been a lot of times this year where Josh Allen has gone back to playing borderline garbage, especially this week against the Jags. I don't know if it's him basically not taking his games as seriously, because when you look at the games, the big games against like the Chiefs, Josh Allen came out and played sharp, took care of the football, looked like a real NFL quarterback that had to make NFL level decisions. But there's been games throughout the season against really bad competition where he comes out and just like doesn't care. He's just running around trying to make stuff happen, turnover-worthy plays out the butt. And that was this week against the Jags, and it actually cost them a win this week. So I don't know necessarily what to do with the Bills. I do think if they were playing any of these teams in the AFC, I still think they'd be favored. But I really don't feel great about that, and it's hard not to overreact when you see Josh Allen look as bad as he did against a Jags defense that is genuinely one of the worst in the NFL. So if you want to put the Titans or the Ravens ahead of the Bills right now, I'm really not going to fault you for it. But I do still really like this staff, and Josh Allen has much better football in him ahead of him, and I know that for sure. So that's going to be the tier 2. And then tier 1, I am still going to have the Rams at number 4, who I crowned the number 1 team in the NFL last week, and man, did they disappoint. Really getting beat up by the Tennessee Titans and did not look like themselves. And a large part of this, and a large part of them still being in tier 1 despite that disappointing loss, is I have given lots of teams that sort of benefit of the doubt for saying, okay, that was just a stinker week. And that's a big part of what's going on here. I think the other teams around them have been very impressive, and we do tier gaps for a reason. These are very slim margins between these teams. But to see Matthew Stafford have that kind of hiccup game that we've seen from him throughout his career, he's also been a player that down the stretch, he kind of can get hot and get cold. I'm just a little bit worried that Matthew Stafford is going to just go right back to being this lights out surgeon and leading the best offense in the NFL. I do really like this Rams defense. I can't wait to see them with Von Miller out there. This team could honestly fairly easily go back to being a top 1, top 2 team after a week. Again, those margins are very slim at the top here, but they are going to drop down after a pretty bad, pretty honestly embarrassing loss. Then we've got the Cardinals +2. What a win, man. Colt McCoy, no DeAndre Hopkins, no AJ Green, no JJ Watt. Didn't matter. Dominant defensively, forcing turnovers especially. I will say, recovering fumbles is a fluky little bit there. They did give up some yardage, but offensively, good to see them have answers with a backup quarterback. Cliff Kingsbury being able to go to punch number 2, punch number 3. Just a good all-around, not just good, just great all-around team win for the Cardinals that have had probably the most surprising culture and team depth on the season. So +2 for the Cardinals. And then the Packers at number 2, actually going to move up a spot this week despite losing to the Chiefs, but I certainly had this thought after the game, and I saw a lot of people with this on Twitter too, that's about as good of a loss as you can find, regardless of Jordan Love and him being your backup and coming in, and him being a first round pick and a lot of expectations there. And I'm going to be doing a film breakdown on Jordan Love this week to kind of break down his first start and what we can maybe think about him moving forward. But removing that from the equation here, reality is the offense wasn't good with the backup in there. It's safe to assume put Rodgers back in there, it's going to look a little bit better. I don't think that's a reach by any stretch of the imagination. But just the simple fact that if this team makes 2 field goals, if they don't fumble a punt that gifts the Chiefs another 3 points, that's a 9-point swing. They win this game just from special teams alone. The defense has been outstanding. One of the best defenses in the NFL this year, period. And they're getting 2 superstar players back in Jair Alexander, Zadarius Smith, getting Aaron Rodgers back moving forward. Again, about as close to a good loss as you'll ever find in the NFL for the Packers, who project very well moving forward, in my opinion. And then the Bucs reclaiming the number 1 spot on the bye week this week due to the Rams faltering. The offense is just a juggernaut. The defense is going to continue to get healthy. The Bucs are heading towards that also envious, hot, and healthy status as we head into the back half of the NFL season. So there are the Week 10 power rankings. Definitely going to be a controversial week with a lot of emotional reactions to a wild Week 9 of NFL action. At the end of the day, I hope you guys enjoyed. I always appreciate you guys watching and listening to my opinion on the NFL. So thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you enjoyed, and we'll see you later. Peace out.